Anywho, let's pray as we get started. Sorry. Lord, oh gosh, thank you for this day. Thank you for this group of people. Lord, thank you for laughter. I pray that you would just make yourself known amongst our conversations tonight as we dive into what the table meant in your ministry, Jesus. God, would you just provide us with new insights and new wisdom and help us to further understand what the table meant to you and what it can mean to us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, our question, icebreaker question tonight is, sticking with the theme here, what is your favorite meal?
Mashed potatoes.
That's not a whole meal.
It can be.
French fries.
No, you cannot choose a potato form as your whole favorite meal.
Says
If
who?
it's got chili on it.
Have you ever had a baked potato bar? That's a whole meal.
Okay, that counts.
Okay.
That's a potato.
What about a mashed potato bar?
Yeah, what if I get mashed potatoes?
Okay,
with
fine,
No,
whatever.
loaded
You can
fries.
choose potatoes.
So we'll
If
see
it
what
doesn't
happens.
have meat,
What's
it's
your
not a
favorite
meal.
meal?
That's my philosophy. So
Vegetarians don't eat meals.
no.
Yeah. They only snack.
Not for me. If I'm gonna say my favorite meal,
graze.
it's gonna
They
be
nibble.
graze.
Yes.
I'm convinced they don't exist. I think vegetarians are still men. Just kidding.
To scare us.
I don't like them.
My favorite is breakfast, and it doesn't matter what time of the day it is.
Oh, that's a good one.
Breakfast.
I love a good chicken Alfredo.
I thought there was something more coming after that.
I was thinking about saying more, and then I decided not to.
I had chicken Alfredo the other day.
I love a good
Last week.
soup.
A good soup.
Good soup, you know.
With a bread bowl?
Soup
Yes.
is your favorite meal.
Any
Again,
kind of
that's not a meal.
soup.
That's an
Taco
appetizer on the way to the
soup, broccoli
meal and the meal.
soup,
Soup is
French
good,
onion,
but
like any kind of soup is
Do you
good.
split pieces?
No, that's the exception. No.
I can't find anybody
That's
who
split pea
I
soup.
love split
No.
pieces.
I've never had it.
Me
What's
either.
the cold
I
soup?
end up eating it for a
Gazpacho.
week when I make it.
Or
Nobody else will eat it.
Bisque. Yeah.
Tomato bisque.
Oh,
With basil.
Is your answer for real mashed potatoes? Okay.
Alex
What's
is
your
anything with
answer?
bacon.
I'm still thinking about
I
it.
said yours is anything with bacon.
No, mine is chicken tender.
That
Well,
too.
that's shocking.
good.
And bacon.
And bacon.
Yeah, and bacon.
I really want a good baked potato now.
same. We should have a baked potato bar.
This wasn't a
We
good
didn't even
subject.
start.
I'm
yet,
sorry.
and we've already lost it.
You
I'm
thought
sorry.
after dinner it would be good question, but it's not.
I like a birthday dinner because it always
Birthday.
changes depending on what I want that year.
I feel like you cheated somehow, but okay.
Without
Technically,
giving
the
an actual
question
Without
was,
giving-
what is your favorite meal? So,
And he said birthday
Mine's
dinner.
birthday dinner because every year I'm always craving something different.
You're
for my
looking
birthday.
for like specific foods and
like my
what the
favorite
courses
meal
are.
Chicken Alfredo.
is like if my, I don't know, I can't even think of my favorite meal, but like
Well, that's
But
a
we're-
healthy.
my favorure meal is chicken Alfredo.
Is it?
Wow,
That's
so you're
what
just
I'm
gonna
looking
rip off
for.
So you want to?
No, I'm giving it.
She's saying be like me.
Oh, sure.
Well,
Yes,
since
because Sydney is perfect, as we've
since I
already
got
gone
whatever
over.
I wanted for Father's Day,
Right.
and I wanted a salad, mashed potatoes, corn casserole, and a steak, and then cookies for dessert, then I'll say that's my favorite meal.
He didn't even ask for a pie this year.
Well, yeah, the dessert needs a change sometimes.
You didn't want a
sometimes
fun
like a
little
pie.
pie?
Actually, it would be creme brulee. It would be my,
Ah.
my actual favorite
Good
dessert. So
See, I can't pick a
Jeez, I
favorite
almost
meal. It
felt
depends on my
That is
mood.
That's
bougie.
bougie.
That is
Yeah.
really
I think I would want fresh seafood. I'm gonna do it fresh seafood.
good choice.
Mine's a toss up
Sushi.
between seafood and Mexican. I mean, but it's gotta be good Mexican, not like Taco Bell.
What are you talking
Okay,
about?
don't discriminate.
That's authentic right there.
Taco Bell is good.
Yeah, Taco Bell's good.
Okay, what's
It's good
good
until
Mexican to you?
later.
Because there are various levels in the hierarchy of Mexican food.
To me, good Mexican.
Be careful.
You have,
there's one that's on
We're
his side of
being
the border.
recorded.
you have Taco Bell
Which is?
here.
Is that really Mexican though? Like that's like
Yeah.
Tex-Mex.
I was gonna
That's
say
You
it's
have like
Tex-Mex.
your you know, your El Sombrero is kind of like right here.
Don't know her.
Okay.
Don't know her. And then there is a place in Vegas that is Mexican. I don't remember the name of it, but it was absolutely the bomb.
You're gonna have to
Right
tell me
off
where
the
that is
strip?
because we're going to Vegas in September. So.
You're going to
Oh, did
September?
he
Yeah.
finally pick a place
Yeah.
for vacation?
Oh no, this has been on the calendar. It's because his mommy planned it.
We're going with work, but I don't know. They've not given us the dates yet. But it could be.
We could be there at the same time. Go to Mexican together. Let's do it.
But his work's not bougie though.
It's the bougie Mexican place.
And he doesn't know the name of it, so
I
he
don't
can't
remember
really give it to you.
It was,
He can only tempt
it
you.
was L anesthesia or something like that.
No, it would.
Because it's
Because you can't
erased your
remember.
mind.
Okay, all right, we're moving forward.
I'll Google it.
Okay. All right, Joseph, just so you know, in this class,
Lindo,
everyone is required to answer
Eldorado.
this question.
La Comida.
Thanksgiving.
Really?
Oh, that's what
I answered too soon. Don't be like me.
I like the Thanksgiving meal, but I like all of the sides. Like, I could do without the turkey and the ham, is fine. But, like, all the sides.
Like mashed
Sweet
potatoes?
Yeah,
Or
no,
turkey.
sweet potato souffle.
Okay,
So
but has it got marshmallows
Yes.
or
Or the crumbly stuff,
Both.
the brown
I like
sugar.
the brown sugar, pecan, all
Mhm.
I like that better than the marshmallow.
Me
I like both.
Yes,
I
all
like
of the
the mashed
above.
potatoes.
Half and half.
Yes.
Give
Shocking
me it all.
answer.
Just give me all the sweet potatoes.
But are they
souffle.
loaded mashed potatoes?
Doesn't matter.
Honestly,
If it's
just
potatoes for me.
just a plain, like really superb mashed potato with some gravy.
Also, I
Brown gravy or white gravy?
both.
Not both.
I
brown.
play both sides. I like both.
No, no, you don't.
Okay, so Angela, what's your favorite meal?
New Year's dinner.
What's that?
New Year's dinner.
Dollars.
The traditional southern.
Oh, she loves that.
What else do you have? That's all I've heard is black eyed peas and
Black
collard.
eyed peas, collard greens, and then her dad sometimes he'll do like a pork roast or ham.
It has significance though,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
each thing.
Isn't
has-
the greens supposed to be
It's
money
supposed
or
to be stuff that
something?
makes you
Peas
vomit.
are luck, and the collard greens mean money. So we should be filthy rich because my daughter eats like almost a whole pot of collard greens, but
Really?
it's not. Yeah, she loves them.
Me
That's
too.
that.
I never had collard greens until we moved up here. And I went to my friend's house, and I literally had never even heard of them because we know this man doesn't eat anything green, much less anything southern. So I ate them, and I was like, "What is this magic? I've never had this before. I love them.
Do
They're
you
so
like
good."
Brussels sprouts?
I
Yeah,
love Brussels sprouts
yeah,
with bacon.
Oh yes.
so good.
They're delicious. You should try them with
No, I just like
bacon.
bacon.
No, you should try them.
No, they're disgusting.
What?
No,
Brussels sprouts, and they
Yeah.
smell
if
worse
you
than
have
they
them
taste.
prepared the right way, they're fantastic.
Yeah, people tell me that, and I try it, and
He
I
says the same
Actually-
thing with coffee. If
I think
Oh,
it's
you
Brussels
can't even
sprouts.
taste this. Oh, this one's really good. There's so much. Bottom line.
It's
Okay.
Nacho Daddy.
Nacho.
Nacho
Like,
Nacho
Daddy.
Daddy. That's the
okay,
name.
hold on. I'm making a quick note. Please pause.
It is so good.
Oh yeah, so Brussels sprouts are actually one of those
Look at the
vegetables that you
pictures.
will, if you don't like them, you'll never like them because it has interacts with a certain DNA strand that only certain people have,
Interesting.
and that's why you
I
you
don't-
taste bitter. to
That's
you.
why things taste green, right?
It's only Brussels sprouts, okay?
He said all things taste green.
Nacho
makes them
Daddy
bitter to
downtown.
I'm gonna go in a restaurant good. I have a good.
Lively hangout for nachos and Mexican
It's in-
fare.
I think it's in Caesar's Palace.
Okay.
I'm looking. It's in the Miracle Mile strip, like the mall. So that's yeah, it's in there.
Perfect. Listen, I keep thinking about, like, Isaac's gonna have to cut like 15, 20 minutes off at the beginning of all of these classes because we had talked about all these ridiculous things. Stop writing no on my paper, it's rude. Okay, anyway, so we're gonna talk about Jesus' meals tonight. Does anybody feel like they could give Joseph, since he hasn't been here the last 2 nights, like a real, like,
We did.
quick, oh, you did?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
asked
Why
why
you
you were
won.
being late.
Here you go.
Yeah.
I was brewing the coffee. I'll have you know, I was doing something important.
Do you want
No, we
paper?
It is an addiction. Shut your face. I know it is.
I may have to have
Oh, I have an extra. Do you want the? Hey, do you want the
Here,
sheets
more,
from
there's
last
more.
night? Because I have an extra copy,
It's really good.
and
I have
then
the fill in the
you can
blanks.
fill in with Sydney's blanks there.
Those are agents, I guess.
Or
I like
AJ's.
reading it.
If you need better copies, I have mine.
I also AJ actually took better notes
Also-
than me, so that's why I
I'm
give
not
him
giving
mine.
mine.
Also, some words are definitely spelled wrong. Some I mean a lot.
Don't worry, I would
Some-
struggle
some by
with
all.
that.
All right, so
Huh?
pick it up. Promise? You misspelled promise.
I told you. Spelling is not my strong suit.
So,
It's math.
if you'd like to borrow Stephanie's instead, I'm sure you can. But we're gonna pick up tonight where we left off. So at the top of your page, it kind of creates the transition for us. So Israel's prophets talked about a day when God would restore the broken covenant in spite of Israel's failure. And this is what we call the new covenant, right? We learned that last night. God promised that there would come a day when he would gather the nations to himself and fulfill his covenant promises. And guess what he would do? He would invite them to a meal, and they would enjoy this meal in his presence, feasting once again on true life. And I added those scripture references there. The one in Isaiah is actually, it sounds really nice, so I was going to read it to you. Isaiah 25, 6-9, it prophesies that in Jerusalem, the Lord of heaven's armies will spread a wonderful feast for all the people of the world. It will be a delicious banquet with clear, well-aged wine and choice meat. Then there he will remove the cloud of gloom, the shadow of death that hangs over the earth, and he will swallow up death forever. So, we kind of find ourselves in the in-between here, where he has promised that he's going to invite humanity back to a meal with him, and that they will feast once again on true life. And so we see this theme continue as Jesus invites his followers to a meal, but it's not really the feast that they were expecting. So Jesus' ministry centered a lot around meals. Like, basically, Jesus' whole ministry, they were either walking somewhere or they were, like, eating a meal with somebody. That's pretty much what was going on most of the time.
Be like Jesus.
Be like Jesus,
Walk
walk
and
around and
Walk
eat,
and eat.
and invite yourself into people's homes and eat their food.
DoorDash.
Yeah. But so Jesus himself is different than the people expected. They expected Jesus to kind of be this great, almost like warrior type hero to come in and take over Rome. And so this really humble carpenter guy is definitely not what they expected. And neither are the people that he invites to his table, where we would think a king would come down and want to eat with the most prestigious religious rulers, or he would want to eat with the people who are high up in the government of the day. Jesus did completely the opposite of that. Where they expected him to have conversation around a table about, how we're going to take over and how are the Jews going to come out on top. Not what his conversations were about at all. And so through all of those things, he really defied expectations and what each of those meals represent. And so Jesus often used meals, here's your first blanks there, he used meals to engage with people and to teach important lessons. To engage with people and to teach important lessons. And I think this is really significant because there are times, obviously, where Jesus is teaching in a synagogue or on the side of a hill, but there's just something more comfortable about sitting around a table like this, isn't there? It's a little more disarming than, preaching at somebody from a stage or from the stairs or whatever it may be. There's a reason that the Jews are instructed to teach their children at meal times. There's a reason that even in our culture now, we still have important family discussions around the table. Maybe sometimes it's more of a coffee table these days, but there's still, a general feeling of we're having important conversations together. We're all facing one another, and it's just a place that's really comfortable. And so in this time, who you ate with and where you ate and the conversations that you had were incredibly important. And they sent a message. And so the fact that Jesus was constantly eating with people that defied expectations and kind of flipping conversations on their heads. And instead of giving, long monologues, he was asking a lot of questions. All of those things kind of give us a picture and send a message about who Jesus is and what really he came to do. And as well, I think it sets an example for us and how we should treat our tables. And so tonight we are going to look at the book of Luke, because in the book of Luke there are 10 stories. There's your next blank. There are 10 stories of Jesus dining with various people. And each of them kind of have a lesson or a significance, both to who is Jesus and what does this mean and what does it tell us about him, but also sets an example for us of if we are Christians and we're to follow his example, and the table is still significant in our culture, well, who should be at our table? How should we be handling conversations around our table? And so we are just going to, tonight, read through those 10 meals. And I'll try and keep it a quick pace and not focus on any one too much because there are 10 of them, and I know that's kind of a lot. But it's just a good way that I think we can walk through and really discover some truths about Jesus' table, who he is, and about our table. So if you will open to Luke chapter 5 with me, we are going to start there. Luke chapter 5, starting in verse 27. Verse 27 through 32. Does anybody want to read that one for us? Heads up, this one is a shorter one.
Later, after Jesus left the town, he saw a tax collector named Levi, or Matthew, sitting at his tax collector's booth. "Follow me and be my disciple," Jesus said to him. So Levi Matthew got up, left everything and followed him. Later, Matthew held a banquet in his home with Jesus as the guest of honor. Many of Matthew's fellow tax collectors and other guests also ate with him. But the Pharisees and their teachers of religious law complained bitterly to Jesus' disciples. "Why do you eat and drink with such scum?" Man, that's harsh. Jesus answered them, "Healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I have come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners and need to repent."
Word.
And then eat.
So the first one is dining with the enemy. Jesus was constantly dining with the enemy. And in this culture, tax collectors were like the worst of the worst. Like they're scum, is what scripture tells us, or what the Pharisees thought they were. And so the question I want you to write under this little section here is, who is at the table? Who's at the table? Because who we sit with makes a statement about who we are. And I think Jesus knew that very clearly. And we see this even, maybe not so much in the adult world as clearly, I still think it's there, but you look at any school cafeteria, who you sit with says something about who you are, who you're friends with, what you think, what you believe, how popular you are, all of those things. My homeschooler down there knows what I'm talking about. But it really does. And I think that was true back then. And so Jesus sitting with a tax collector, being invited to his house, eating with him, and not choosing that moment to just tell him all the things that he had ever done wrong. It's not like he went to go eat with Levi Matthew just to be like, hey, you're a sinner, get it together. He went to have fellowship with him. And so we read this now, and I think we're almost a little numb to it. It's like we go, oh, of course he ate with tax collectors and sinners. We hear that phrase a lot. But it was super countercultural in that time. It was like we don't associate with these people. They're almost like grouped with the Romans, and even though they're Jewish, like we don't. Yeah, we don't consider them our people because they steal from us, much less eat with them around a table. And so I wanted to consider and talk for just a second and let us brainstorm. Who do we think would be the equivalent of the tax collectors today? Like, who do we think are what Jesus would call the sick, or maybe even the people who, if us good church folk were out seen eating with these people, that there would be whispers about us, or we would maybe be nervous about. Like what kind of people come to your mind? That would be almost the tax collectors of today. Why are you all smirking? I feel like you want to say something, but you don't. You can throw it out there. If you are not comfortable answering in front of the camera, I can have Isaac cut this part too, so you feel like you can.
Oh, that's right, it's on camera.
Yeah.
Now you just made it awkward.
I'm sorry. I can have him cut this part.
It depends. Some people go by just how people look. Like,
true.
Yeah.
the people with the tattoos, the dirty people, the, rough looking people, but then sometimes it's just other cultures. It's, the Mexicans, we're talking about the Mexicans, they're coming across the border, or, the Asians, they're taking everything over, or what, there's a whole lot of things, and then also I think the hot topic right now in our culture is all the LGBTQ, RSTUV, WXYZ plus people,
Yeah.
So I depending on who you are and who's looking in, I think any of those could be.
Yeah, I think it depends on who's seeing you at the table.
Yeah. Because even now with the Roe v. Wade going on, if you sat with somebody that someone knows is pro-life, they would assume you're pro-life or the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, politics is a
That's
big
true.
I
thing.
was gonna say like
Everything is.
Any kind of
politicians too.
politics right now would be a big thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to eat with Trump or Biden.
Well,
Trump could probably buy me a good steak because he's got fancy stuff.
He would eat at a
Biden's-
fancy restaurant.
He is very.
he is bougie.
That's my man.
He has an old house.
He does have gold towers, and that's pretty cool.
I feel like you have an answer down there, Joseph. You don't want to say? Do you want to write it down and I'll read it?
Is your answer Sydney, and we just don't want
Yeah, I wouldn't eat with me either. In fact, I hate that I have to.
Okay.
We went deep there.
So just continue to ponder that question.
If you don't know who it is, come Sunday morning and find out who it should be.
There you go. That's true. We are talking about that Sunday morning. But like, just get in your head, like, if Jesus were to come today and sit down and have a meal with somebody, that would probably make us religious people go, who would that be? And then consider, would that person be at my table?
You know that? Sorry, were we moving on?
No,
Oh,
you go.
okay.
You're good.
You know that thing that is going around on social media, like anytime that some new political thing comes out, and it's like Jesus washing the feet of like the people
Oh,
that
yeah.
society
People.
like hates right now.
Yeah.
It would be any of those people,
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
which is basically everyone
Criminals.
that you listed.
or even
criminals.
drug addicts.
Yeah.
Drug addicts. Yeah, the local drug dealer, like,
Vladimir Putin.
for real.
True.
Yeah.
Legit.
That's true.
Any Russian
Yeah.
soldier.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so just think about, like, those are the people that Jesus had at his table.
Or any of the people that were involved in the terrorist attacks.
I was gonna say, were
Any
you
of them,
Muslims?
Any of the pilots that were, any of them.
True.
Yeah.
You think about it.
Yeah.
But also, like, couldn't you say even Muslims?
School
Because
shooters.
society likes to
Muslims.
think
Right,
they're
right.
they're against Christianity.
Right. Right. So when you start to think about all those people in our culture, really the point I want to write down here, and this one is really big kind of for the rest of these, but just that there's a seat for everyone at the table. And that's what Jesus is showing us here. That there is as much opportunity for you and I as there is for the professing gay guy down the street and the Muslim who crashed the plane and the pro-life or the pro-choice woman, like whoever. Everyone has a seat at the table. And so for us, I want us to consider who is at our table. quite literally, like, who are the people that we are sitting down with and doing life with? Because Jesus also had his disciples there, right? It wasn't like he was just there on his own, like lone wolf on a mission. He had his community of people who were already following him. So I think it's great for us to have this kind of community. These people should always be at our table. However, I don't think that they should fill our entire table.
Yeah.
We should always have more than a few seats open for the people that we disagree with, for the people that maybe the Big C church is known for not liking or not being a fan of or not agreeing with. So consider who's at your table. Who are you going to lunch with? Who are you inviting into your home to eat with your family? And of course, you always have to be careful with those things, but just know, like, those are the people that Jesus ate with. So first of all, dining with the enemy. The second one, before we read it, is the uninvited guest. The uninvited guest. And this one is going to be in Luke chapter 7. Starting at verse 36. And this one's a little bit longer, so if you want to read it, you're going to have to be brave. Oh, Sydney's got us. All right.
When one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him, he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. A woman in that town who lived a sinful life learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, so she came there with an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with tears. Then she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisees who had invited him in saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner." Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. 2 people owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay back. So he forgave the debts of both. Now which of them will love him more? Simon replied, "I suppose the one who had the bigger debt forgiven." "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. Then he turned toward the woman and said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman from the time I entered has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore, I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, as her great love has shown. But whoever has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." The other guests began to say among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace."
Yeah. So, it's not just the cultural pariahs that Jesus invites to sit at his table. It's also the people who are inconvenient. So this lady just showed up. Have you ever, had a dinner or something and somebody just, shows up and you were not expecting them at all? Maybe at a wedding reception or something. I don't know. People just show up, right? And she showed up and she interrupted what they were doing. This was a Pharisee who invited him to his house. They were probably going to have deep conversations about, God and scripture and what does this mean and what does that mean? And this woman shows up and just completely derails whatever they had planned. And yet, instead of Jesus going, "Oh, I'll get to you later," he stops and he pays attention to her and he ministers to her and he responds in compassion and he forgives her sins. And so if we put ourselves in that scenario, would we have responded in anger or would we have responded in compassion to somebody who was inconvenient or needed our attention, but it was unplanned? And so there's a seat at the table for everyone, including the unexpected guest, the one who shows up at the last minute. Do you guys ever find yourself struggling with, I'm doing a task or I'm doing I'm already in a conversation with somebody and somebody else comes up and it's hard to give them your attention. I struggle with that a lot. You know, and you have to be wise. You can't just always cut off what you're doing. You have to kind of weigh that out. But, you know, this woman was coming to him because she wanted forgiveness for her sins, because she was coming to worship him. And the Pharisees were so angry that she came and interrupted what was already happening. But ultimately, Jesus deemed that that was more important. And so there's a seat for everyone, even the unexpected guest. And when somebody shows up unexpected in your life, consider it as an opportunity to minister to them, because we have something that they need. That's what it comes down to. Jesus had something that this woman needed, and we do too. So when people come to our table and maybe we're not so happy about it at first, remember that we have the gospel message of life. We have like the tree of life in the person of Jesus that we can give to them. And that's something that they need. And we can see it as an opportunity to minister rather than, dang, they really interrupted my plans that I had going on. So that's the second one. Number 3, we find in Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9, and this is feeding the hungry. Does anybody want to read this one? Luke chapter 9, 10 through 17. Feeding the hungry. There's enough for everybody to read once. So, just throwing that out there.
I can't read without coughing, so I would prefer not.
Okay, Pat gets a pass.
When the apostles returned, they reported to Jesus what they had done. And he took them with him, and they withdrew by themselves to a crowd called, I'll say that word.
Bethsaida.
Got it. But the crowds learned about it and followed him. He welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God, and healed those who needed healing. Late in the afternoon, the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowd away so they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging, because we are in a remote place here." He replied, "You give them something to eat." They answered, "We only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, unless we go and buy food for all this crowd." About 5,000 men were there, but he said to his disciples, "Have them sit down in groups of about 50 each." The disciples did so, and everyone sat down. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke them. Then he gave them to the disciples to distribute to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 baskets full of broken pieces that were left over.
So,
That's
this
one of my
story
favorite things
is
in
really
the whole
cool.
Bible, is
Yeah,
that there.
me too. I love this story, and there's so much that you can pull out of it. And I will have to tell you a story about when this happened in real life on a mission trip one time, and it was so cool, but that's for another time. Because the point of this is, when we're talking about feeding the hungry, so much of gathering around a table is about, for Jesus, there's this concept that he's meeting a physical need before he gets to the spiritual need. So he knows that all these people have been sitting here for hours and hours and hours, and it says there were 5,000 men. So that doesn't count all the women and children that were probably there too. So we've probably got like 15 to 20,000 people all sitting on this hillside. And he's been teaching, and they've been listening. And if you've ever sat in church hungry, you probably know that your stomach growling sometimes affects your ability to listen. And so this is why Jesus was constantly feeding people and healing people, and meeting all of these practical physical needs. 1, to show, he is God, he can do these miracles, but 2, because he was meeting a physical need so that the door to their spiritual need would be open. We live so much in our flesh and in our humanly, self, that we need sometimes that physical need met before we can meet the spiritual need. And this is why at the church we have things like benevolence and outreach ministries, where we know that first conversation may not be, "Hey, have you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior?" But, if we help somebody with their rent, if we bring ice cream to the kids in the trailer park, if we, meet some kind of physical need, that opens the door for relationship, which then opens the door for the spiritual needs. It's really being hospitable on a whole other level. And so if you haven't written it down already, the point kind of for this one is that Jesus cares for our physical and spiritual needs. He's not just about our heart and our spirit. He also cares about us as human beings. I mean, he was fully man and fully human, as much as he was fully God. So he cares for our physical and spiritual needs. And so the example that leads for us is, what are the physical needs that we could be meeting, with our neighbors or our family or people in our community that could open the door to somebody's spiritual need? What are the things that you could easily meet? A meal to be made, a porch to be fixed, I don't know, what other physical needs do people have? Things like that you can just easily say, hey, I can do that for you. And that opens the door to the spiritual need. Are you going to say something? Okay.
No,
You took a
good.
breath like
Sorry.
you were going to share something. Okay. Okay, moving on. Number 4. Mealtime priorities is what I'm going to call this one. Mealtime priorities. This one is found in Luke chapter 10, 38 through 42. It's only 4 verses.
As Jesus and his disciples
There you
were
go.
on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her."
So this is one we kind of hear a lot, right? And what's the typical takeaway from this one?
Don't be a Martha.
Don't be a Martha. She's the worst. But really, she wasn't the worst. The thing is, her doing all of this work, like, that in and of itself wasn't bad. It's just that she had her priorities out of whack. So instead of having the main purpose as spending time with Jesus, right? That's what this whole meal was for. She chooses instead to have the main purpose of preparing the meal, getting everything ready for him. And I know this is a struggle, because there really are practical things that we have to do, right? Especially when we're hosting somebody in our home, when we're getting ready to minister to some, like, there's really practical things that you have to do. And it's not like Jesus is like, no, don't clean your house, don't make the meal. It's more about what's important, what is of the highest priority. And in that moment, it was spending time with Jesus. That was priority number 1. And so when we look at this, I think this sends us a message that you don't have to have everything in order to approach the table of Jesus. You don't have to have your life in order to approach the table of Jesus. Your life can be a complete mess. You cannot have your stuff together. You can still be in the midst of your sin, and Jesus will still invite you to the table and let you know that that is the first thing that is important. You don't have to have your life together in order to approach the table of Jesus. Because Jesus invites you just as you are. And of course, if you're in the midst of sin and you're in the midst of mess, God works through that with you. But as Christians, sometimes we get this backwards, especially when we're looking at messy people. And we want them to get their life together before they come to the table. But Jesus says, no, you need to flip your priorities. First is relationship with me. First is sitting at my table and spending time together. And then we'll work through the messy stuff and we'll get there. And so as we look at our lives and our tables, are we more concerned with either fixing people, if it's, talking about a particular person, or maybe for us it's accomplishing tasks, doing stuff for God, or are we more concerned with investing in relationships? Which one is more important to us? when it comes to our priorities of ministering to people? Is it checking the boxes, or is it investing time into our relationships? So that's number 4, mealtime priorities. Number 5 is wash what matters. Wash what matters. And this one comes from a scene in Luke 11, just one chapter later, 37 through 53. This is a longer one, so I can read this one unless somebody really just wants to volunteer. All right, I got it. Okay. As Jesus was speaking, one of the Pharisees invited him home for a meal. So he went in and took his place at the table. His host was amazed to see that he sat down to eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. Then the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools! Didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you will be clean all over. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. Yes, what sorrow awaits you, for you are like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without knowing the corruption they are stepping on." "Teacher," said an expert in the religious law, "you have insulted us too in what you said." And he says, "Yes," said Jesus, "what sorrow also awaits you experts in religious law? For you crush people with unbearable religious demands. You never lift a finger to ease the burden. What sorrow awaits you? For you build monuments for the prophets your own ancestors killed long ago. But in fact, you stand as witnesses who agree with what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you join in their crime by building the monuments. This is what God in his wisdom said about you. I will send prophets and apostles to them, but they will kill some and persecute others." Where am I reading to? 53. "As a result, this generation will be held responsible for the murder of all God's prophets from the creation of the world, from the murder of Abel to the murder of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, it will certainly be charged against this generation. What sorrow awaits you experts in religious law, for you remove the key to knowledge from the people. You don't enter the kingdom yourselves, and you prevent others from entering." As Jesus was leaving, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees became hostile, trying to provoke him with many questions. So we see in this kind of rant that Jesus has here, that the Pharisees were so concerned with Jesus not doing the ceremonial hand washing. And he kind of goes off on them in this way that he does several times with Pharisees, where he's like, you focus so much on this little thing that is not important, that you miss this huge thing. Like, you focus so much on washing the outside, but not the inside. You focus so much on your tithing, but you neglect justice. You focus so much on your praise and attention, but you bury people under the weight of the law. And ultimately, he says, you're preventing people from entering the kingdom. And so the question here is, are we so focused on outward appearances that we are keeping others from sitting at the table of Jesus? Are we so focused on outward appearances, whether that's politics, whether that's sexuality, whether that's literally being gross and dirty, whether that's, not doing what we consider the great religious ceremonies of our day? Are we so focused on outward appearances that we keep others from sitting at the table of Jesus? And really, as an addendum to that, are there parts of us that need purified? Are we like the Pharisees, where we're all nice and clean on the outside, but we need to clean up our act on the inside in order to be able to receive these other kinds of people. So wash what matters in your life. Okay, moving on. Number 6 is consider your conversation. Consider your conversation. This is going to be in Luke 14. And it's 1 through 24, but I'm just going to summarize this one since it's a pretty long one.
Chapter 14. Jesus heals on the Sabbath.
Can you put it on like
One Sabbath
1.5?
day, Jesus went to eat dinner in the home of a leader of the Pharisees. And the people were watching him closely. There was a man there whose arms and legs were swollen. Jesus asked the Pharisees, experts in religious law, is it permitted in the law to heal people on the Sabbath day or not? When they refused to answer, Jesus touched the sick man and healed him and sent him away. Then he turned to them and said, which of you doesn't work on the Sabbath? If your son or your cow falls into a pit, don't you rush to get him out? Again, they could not answer. Jesus teaches about humility. When Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table.
Hey, can I have you pause this?
Yeah, that's too long.
Yeah, it's really long.
It's long,
Okay,
too.
so basically this is another, it's
I mean,
another
the whole reading and the music. Is,
dinner scene. They ask him lots of questions. He gives lots of wise teaching. They talk about working on the Sabbath, places of honor, who gets to sit at God's table. And like I said, when Jesus was explaining, he didn't go into deep monologue. He would either ask really great questions that made them think, or he would give parables to break things down. And so it was all out of a desire to bring people into right relationship with God. That's what his conversations were always about. That was always the end goal when people gathered around a table with Jesus, that it would point them to right relationship with God. Whether it was hot topics or important questions or just normal conversation. His goal was always to point them to right relationship with God. And so when we consider the conversations around our table, particularly hot topics, let's think about family gatherings when politics come up, okay? How do we handle those? Do we consider those opportunities to bring people into right relationship with God? Because they can be, maybe not through arguing, but when important topics of our day, maybe we're not talking about working on the Sabbath, but maybe we're talking about, I don't know, what's an important topic of today?
Anything in politics?
Anything, and we're just gonna say politics.
mashed potatoes.
Okay? Are we sitting there thinking, I'm gonna say what's right and I'm gonna argue? Or are we considering that our conversation can be a pinpoint to point people to Jesus? That's really what this is. All right, we're gonna keep moving. Hoping we're gonna wrap this up. Number 7 is invite yourself over. This one is totally contradictory to anything your mom has ever taught you, but you'll see why in a second. Invite yourself over. This is in Luke 19. It is the story of Zacchaeus. We are not going to read it because hopefully you know. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And the Lord said,
Yo, come down here. I'm going to your house today.
Zacchaeus, you come down. We're going to your house today. So basically, Zacchaeus, again, he's this... I have heard that Zacchaeus is like the worst of the tax collectors. He really was a pariah. Like, people did not want to associate with him. But he was so desperate to hear Jesus that he climbed up in a tree. And this is the only time, I think, that we see Jesus invite himself to somebody else's house. But the cool thing is that Zacchaeus was only expecting to hear Jesus and see him from afar. And Jesus points him out of the crowd and approaches him and says, hey, I'm coming to your house, and we're going to hang out, and we're going to eat, and we're going to talk together. And so Jesus makes a point to pursue people. That's really what this one is about. He makes a point to pursue people and to welcome himself into the intimate spaces of people's lives. He does this with all of us. And so as we consider for ourselves, think about, are there people on the sidelines that I need to reach out to? people who maybe have thrown up walls, or maybe I just assume that they don't want to have anything to do with me because there's somebody like a tax collector who I just assume is not going to want to have a conversation with a Christian. But there are other people on the sidelines and the margins that I need to invite myself into their life. Not in a, hey, I'm coming, get out of the way, let me into all of your secrets, but just like, hey, we're going to have dinner. I'm not taking no for an answer. Let's hang out. Let's start a relationship. I'm going to text you even if you don't text me back. Are there people that you need to invite yourself into their life? Number 8 is a new kind of meal. A new kind of meal. And this one is in Luke chapter 22, 14 through 38. And this is the Last Supper. And so I'm going to hit this one really quick because we're going to come back to it at the end and kind of the significance. But basically we know this was a really transformative meal. So much so that it's one that we still mimic today. And we learned yesterday that this was a Passover meal. And that Jesus took these things that had symbolized important stuff for the Jewish culture and said, hey, actually, I am the bread. This is my blood that is going to be poured out for you. And the cool thing about this meal is we now get to see the completion of, he's met a physical need, and in this meal, he's really meeting the spiritual need. He's taking everything on that table and saying this now represents a new covenant that is coming with my death. And they didn't really understand all of that at the moment, but he was establishing this new covenant. And a side note here, just because we focus so much on who's at the table, let's remember that Judas was still at the table at this point. That he still ate and broke bread with Judas before he had this conversation about who would betray him. And that's really hard for us. Like, we know that Jesus did it, but if we think about people who have betrayed us and really hurt us, it's a difficult thing to think about having a meal with them and just breaking bread with them and being friendly. And so in this moment, Jesus isn't just the head of the table. He really establishes he is the thing that we should be feasting upon. This is why people in the early church, or outside of the early church, thought the early church people were cannibals, because they talked about eating Jesus. But really, like, in a spiritual sense, he is the thing that we should be feasting upon spiritually. He's establishing himself as the new tree of life. And so the question we can ask ourselves here is, do we see meals as a way to meet others' spiritual needs? We know it helps them physically, but do we see meals as a way to meet others' spiritual needs? So that's a new kind of meal. Now, number 9, I'm going to go through these last two quickly, is disciple over dinner. Disciple over dinner. Jesus was constantly teaching around the dinner table. I'm sure they had joking and laughing, but all of his conversations were so meaningful. And this scene that we see in Luke 24, again, I'm not going to read it, but you guys are more than welcome to, is actually after he rose from the dead. So this is after he's risen from the dead. He's meeting back with his disciples, and he is still teaching them, even after his resurrection, was continually revealing himself and truths about himself. So when we look at hosting people at our table, which hopefully we will do, you have to plan not just the menu, but also the conversation. You know, where do you want to get in your conversation with these people? It's not just about the physical, it's about the spiritual. And so the question we ask ourselves is, are we using our gatherings around the table to point people to Jesus? Which still goes in line with some of the things we've seen before here, but it's a pattern Jesus has. Are we using our gatherings around the table, our meals, if that's shorter for you to write, to point people to Jesus or reveal truths about him? So disciple over dinner. And then last but not least, number 10 is that meals are a source of comfort. We know this in the South, right?
Mashed potatoes.
Mashed potatoes. Definitely a source of comfort. And then this story that we see here in Luke 24:36 through 43.
You don't have it written down here. Where's it again?
Oh, I don't? I'm sorry.
No.
Luke 24:36 through 43. 24:36 through 43. Sorry, I thought I had that one on there. Again, this is after he's risen from the dead. And basically his disciples are really freaked out and thought they were seeing a ghost. And so he stands there and he's like, no, it's me. And then they gave him fish and he ate it as they watched. So first of all, it's a thing for him to be like, it's okay, it's me. Watch me eat this food. Nom, nom, nom. I am real, not a ghost. Woohoo! So it's a comfort to them. But he was also doing something familiar to put their minds at ease. And so much like comfort food, Jesus eating at this point was ministering to the disciples' weary hearts. And as silly as it sounds, I do think comfort from a meal is a real thing. After someone has had a tough day or is going through a rough season in their life, or just in the midst of crisis, meals can speak volumes to people. And just inviting someone to your table can be so soothing and welcoming and just something that somebody needs. And so the question I want us to consider here is there somebody that I can uplift or comfort through a meal? Or maybe if you're not a great cook, by just inviting them into my home. Is there somebody that I can comfort or uplift through a meal? And so those are the 10 meals and scenes that we see in the book of Luke. And throughout the Gospels, there are many, many more. But I wanted to go through those today because I think they show us, many of them are similar. It's a lot about who's at your table, what conversations are you having, how intentional are you, and what message is that sending to people. But this line here with your next fill in the blanks is really important because Jesus' call to the table is more than an invitation to come and dine with him. It is an invitation to feast on who he is and to learn more about him through the word. It's an invitation to feast on who he is and to learn more about him through the word. And this is why I said I'm going to come back and touch on the Passover meal, is because through that, Jesus claims that he is the new source of life, is really what it comes down to. That next line that you have there, in John, we didn't read it in Luke, but in John, the gospel, he claims to be the true bread and the true vine. And he's offering himself as the new tree of life, going all the way back to the first day, all the way back to the book of Genesis, where the rules of the meal were broken. Therefore, our relationship with God was broken. Jesus is now offering himself, not just a new meal, not just a new covenant, but saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the new tree of life where you come and you get the things that you need. And so it moves from being just a meal with him to reinstating that original meal in creation. And the covenant that we now, I know it sounds weird, but we feast on him. Like he becomes where we draw our source of life from. And so this is why we do communion every week here. It's not just a rote religious ritual that we do, but it's it's a symbol of the new covenant. It's that meal, although it doesn't much taste like a meal. It tastes a little bit like styrofoam and acid, but it represents the meal with which God brought in the new covenant. And so tomorrow we are going to continue and talk about that meal throughout the early church and what it represented for them. And then we're going to talk about the final meal and the final banquet that is to come for all of us. So there you have it. Good stuff. All right. Do you guys have any comments or questions or?
What's our daily table thing?
Table prayer blessing.
Oh, the prayer. I can do the table blessing in just a second. But
You got too far.
yeah, I got too far ahead. Wanted to give a moment for discussion or questions.
Alright, that was not the priority.
You got your priorities out of whack, man. You Martha.
Always one in the bunch.
AJ, is it Martha? Why are you American?
Okay. Well, if nobody has anything to add, that's all right. And I will go ahead and do our table blessing for today. I should have had this pulled up already, but it's all right. I'm sorry. There it is. What's today? Tuesday.
Christ our closest companion.
Okay, Tuesday's table blessing. If you will bow your heads. Christ is our closest companion. For the consolations of friendship and fellowship, for the blessing of family and of the family of God, for the assurance that we do not walk this week's road alone, but are gathered into community, making good pilgrimage together through this life and towards the eternal city, we thank you. For the assurance that you go before us and also walk beside us, Lord Christ, we thank you all the more. For your tender care displayed in the friends and family now before us, we offer you our praise. How blessed we are to be called your children. How blessed to be adopted into your family. Blessed be your name, O God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit,